Hello and welcome to Saturday Morning Cartoons, the weekly podcast that revisits, reviews, and ridicules some of the world's weirdest animated series. Coming to you from the moon of Ganymede, I'll be your host, Dave Trumbore. Joining me as always, he's a former assassin for the Red Dragon Syndicate, my co-host, Sean Paul Ellis. How's it going, buddy?
David, 3, 2, 1, let's jam.
Yeah, now cue them saxophones. We don't have our soundboard ready for saxophones, do we?
That's fine. We have the next best thing with us that is joining us tonight.
By way of introduction, also joining us this week, she's a cryogenically frozen beauty queen who's currently dealing with amnesia. It's Allison Keene.
Hello.
Welcome to the show.
Yay.
Welcome back to the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Of course.
How's it going, Allison? Welcome back.
It's good. I was happy to revisit the series. This is great.
Yeah, not just our series here at Saturday Morning Cartoons, but this particular series that we'll be talking about tonight, which is, of course, Cowboy Bebop.
Mm-hmm.
Was this a listener suggestion or just a really good idea from one of us?
This is just a really good idea from one of us.
That's what I thought. I think it's yours. So you take the really good idea on this time.
Oh, no. I think it was a collaborative effort. So I'm cool sharing the love on this one.
Excellent. I mean, I know Allison wanted to watch it again too because I subjected her to a poorly dubbed and captioned version that may or may not have been a bootleg knockoff, possibly years ago, and then she kindly got me a professional and legally available purchasable version. But then we decided to take a look and watch some more episodes.
Yeah, and one thing that we mentioned before we started recording is that we all noted that the English dub version, which is usually a terrible thing when it comes to foreign movies and
anime
TV
purists.
shows, right, is excellent for Cowboy Bebop. And it may actually even be better than the original Japanese voice acting. The English acting is absolutely amazing. So yeah, that was definitely a surprise.
Yeah, and I know Sean definitely had a point on that too. He mentioned that beforehand.
Yeah, I mean, Stephen Bloom and Bo Billingsley, who do Spike Spiegel and Jet Black, are just phenomenal. And I obviously grew up watching. I obviously watched the version that had the English voice cast in it, and so when I went back and actually watched the original Japanese voice cast, there was just something missing. It really kind of felt like there was something missing because Spike and Jet had such distinct voices in the English language cast that they're unmistakable, and they sound so fantastic. And then there was just something that seemed off when I was watching the original Japanese version. So I agree, Allison. I think the English language cast for this is far superior.
Yeah, and that's kind of a rare thing too. But it's just one of many kind of like side points that we'll be talking about in praise of this show as we go on throughout the episode. But before we get too far, if listeners out there aren't familiar with it, Sean's actually going to walk us through the history of Cowboy Bebop before we get started here.
Sure. So Cowboy Bebop is a 1998 anime television series that's produced by Sunrise, featuring a production team that's led by Shinichiro Watanabe, screenwriter Keiko Nobumoto, character design by Toshihiro Kawamoto, technical designer Kimitoshi Yamane, and composer Yoko Kanno. The series premiered in Japan on TV Tokyo in 1998, broadcasting only 12 episodes and is special due to its controversial adult-themed content. The entire 26 episodes of the series was later broadcast in 1999. In 2001, Cowboy Bebop became the first anime title to be broadcast on Adult Swim in the United States, which is exactly how and when and where I began listening to this show.
Yeah, same for me. I mean, it was one of those. Was it Toonami? Was it the afternoon, or did they have it on like the late night run, midnight?
Yeah,
run?
it was like the midnight like Adult Swim Toonami.
Yeah, they probably didn't play this for the kids coming home from elementary school at 4:00 in the afternoon. Well, Sean and I watched some dark stuff back in the day.
That's correct.
But then again, yeah, it was on mostly at night. So I guess that's a good segue right into what the show is actually about. So let's dig into it. In the year 2071, roughly 60 years after an accident with a hyperspace gateway made the Earth uninhabitable, humanity has colonized most of the rocky planets and moons of the solar system. Amid a rising crime rate, the Inter-Solar System Police, known as ISSP, set up a legalized contract system in which registered bounty hunters, also referred to as cowboys, chase criminals and bring them in alive in return for a reward. The series protagonists are bounty hunters working from the spaceship Bebop. The original crew are Spike Spiegel, an exiled former hitman of the criminal Red Dragon Syndicate, and his partner Jet Black, a former ISSP officer. They are later joined by Faye Valentine, an amnesic con artist, which is a hell of a description for her, and Ed Wong, an eccentric girl skilled in hacking, and Ein, a genetically engineered Pembroke Welsh corgi with human-like intelligence. I'm curious, before we jump in here, I'm curious as to everybody's just kind of favorite character off the cuff from like the whole series. Allison, do you have a favorite?
I like all of them for different reasons, but honestly, Edward White might be my favorite.
Okay.
Also, because it took me a really long time to figure out that Edward was a girl.
Which is
possibly the whole series, actually, until the very end.
A fun part of the series, too, is like everybody, as they're watching it, you're just like, what is this character?
And I'm even going to venture to say, was it actually finalized? Do you really know? Because there's some doubt that's cast by Ed's father in an episode.
We'll get to that because that's actually one of the episodes that we chose to talk about tonight. We're actually going to divert a little bit from how we normally do things. Each of us picked an episode that we kind of saw as our favorite or just one of the best of the series. And each of us in turn are going to kind of like say why we thought it was the best and then just have a brief discussion about it. So I don't want to get too much into that now because that's one that we'll have a discussion on in a little bit here. But yeah, so Edward, for you.
Yeah, I love them all for different reasons, like I said, but there's something so weird about Ed and her, it's just even weird to say, but and her relationship with Ein, and brings this sort of comedy and levity to a show that can be really, really dark. And I think that there's just a lot of positivity and happiness that comes from them that kind of balances everything else out. And I don't know, it consistently make me laugh.
Yeah,
Ein and Ed both. That combo maybe is my favorite.
Definitely, and everybody has like moments of like levity and humor in here, but they're consistently like the most optimistic, brightest, most energy filled,
and just weird, saying
so
like
weird.
The weirdest things, and then like getting back to hacking, and then like just cartwheeling away, and
as you do,
whatever. So,
Sean, how about you?
It was definitely Jet Black.
Really? Okay.
I really feel that. And that's going to be reflected in the episode that we ended up watching tonight. I feel like he is such a strong supporting character, and far too often he sort of gets overlooked in some of the bounty hunting and what he's doing. But I love the episodes where it's just him cooking.
Yeah,
yes.
Which is like in the intro too. Is one of the best.
Yeah. Right. Or it's him cooking and making a comment. He's just like, it's bell peppers with beef, and then Spike's like, there's no beef in this. And he's like I said, it's bell peppers with beef.
Yeah,
and like
it's a special.
He's very firm, and I love the idea that he is a former ISSP officer, and the history that he sort of has with that. And the episode that I chose kind of brings that to a resolution for him, which I think is really powerful. I think that it definitely has to do with the fact that he has this robotic arm that you don't really talk about until very late in the season. Right. And he has this metal piece that's under his eye that
it's like holding his skull together, but you never really talk about it.
But they discuss the arm, but it's just it's the whole idea of biomechanics and sort of the modifications, the body modifications that he's undergone to preserve his arm and allow that to function and the type of person he is. But I think he just lives with this really strict set of morals, and he's a good person despite the fact that he is a bounty hunter, which is typically looked at as a negative profession.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I'm actually, my favorite happens to be Jet Black as well, which is kind of interesting. Yeah. None of us picked like arguably the main guy in the series, which is Spike Spiegel, who the largest arc in the entire series from, moment one till literally the final moment basically revolves around Spike. But he's kind of like the easy guy to say like, oh, Spike's my favorite. And just, I've loved Spike. He's an incredible character. But like Allison said, like all these characters have great strengths, weaknesses. They all complement each other really well. But I've always gravitated towards Jet. And I think it's just because he's kind of that rock. Bebop is his ship. He's like the main guy. He's ostensibly the captain. And he's kind of like the more or less father figure, even though at one point I think they say he's only like 36. So he's like our age at this point.
But Faye is supposed to be like 20 or something like that. So
20, but also because of her.
Also like 90.
Also like 98 years old or whatever.
Right. And let's be really serious with Jet Black. He's got some undeniably distinct facial hair, and as a man with facial hair, that's pretty badass.
It's pretty badass.
I love like Wolverine.
He's like a bald Wolverine. It's great. Okay, so I just wanted to get that out of the way, just so we knew going forward, because I think among the four of us, and yes, there is one missing in action here among the cowboys gathered for this show tonight. We will talk about that episode first, but I think we've picked great episodes that highlight not only the teamwork but also the individual characters, which wasn't really planned. It just kind of worked out this way. So we'll get to talk about each of the individual characters a little bit more as we go through these episodes. But before we do that, I know I keep teasing you, Sean, buddy, let's talk about this theme song. Let's talk about it.
This is the challenge for me, is that this week and for the 2 weeks that follow for this show, for Saturday Morning Cartoons, we are arguably reviewing my favorite 2 theme songs ever for cartoons. This does a phenomenal job for Cowboy Bebop in terms of setting tone, mood, sort of the energy, the certain parts where you have sort of the brass that kind of breaks out and has certain solos. It feels like the battles and the fights that you see Spike participate in are as fluid as those movements. And that continues to always impress me. And I'm also a sucker for brass in any theme song. I know we've had it with Cowboy Bebop, we've had it with JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Right. And so some of these things, like I love to hear that, but the fact that Yoko Kanno, that she put together such an incredible soundtrack and band for the seatbelts.
Right.
The moment this song comes on, I kind of just start moving. Like I get pumped up and it gets stuck in your head. And not to mention, this theme song is incredible to listen to, and it does a fantastic job of just setting the stage for what's about to happen. But they could not have a better outro song. I feel like they complement each other so well in terms of bookending every single episode of this, that it's beautiful. And they have very different tones and sort of, it feels like intention in each. Like one is to get you excited about the show, and one is sort of kind of like a slow release from what you've just watched. And it's just beautiful from start to finish.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, just themes. If I'm just focusing on the theme song, it's one of my all-time favorites. I don't know how many times I've said this on the show. Somebody can go back through our 98 episodes and see how many times I've said that. But I want to say I feel really strong that it's less than 5 times that I've said that. Because like Johnny Quest is probably one of them. This one is definitely one, and Batman is definitely one.
Yeah.
I can't think of any others off the top of my head. Those are just, and they all kind of have the similar. They've got some similarities to it. So it's no dialogue, no lyrics.
Well, very minimal lyrics.
Very, very minimal, exactly, for this one. Because it's that kind of like jazzy, kind of like they got a little riff going, and then you get into it. And I just love the jazz elements of this. But if we're talking music overall, this is some of my favorite music for a show, a project ever, not just a cartoon series. I mean, normally when we talk about cartoon series, we never talk about their music other than the theme song, right? How often do we talk about like, oh, the composer of this, or man, this piece really moved this action beat along? Never.
The moments in Bots Master where the music complemented the insanity of that show made that
it's
series.
Laser time, boys.
Paramount.
Oh God, why would you bring that up when we're talking about such good music? But yeah, I love it.
You got to go with the highs and lows on this one, Dave.
I guess. Yeah, go.
It drives the emotion too in so many scenes, and not like it's not manipulative in any way, but it complements the story that's being told. Like at the end of Hard Luck Woman, I don't know what the song is. It sounds like sort of late 90s Britpop, which is so unusual. And I'm not sure if they switched it, because sometimes when they do the DVDs, they lose the rights, to certain things. I don't know, but whatever it is, it works perfectly because it's such like this melancholic song, but you aren't expecting it for a show like this, an animated series, to pull out a song that you would normally hear in like an hour-long drama, and it just works so well. And that's true for, like you said, every episode it's different, and Sean, like you pointed out, sometimes it's to hype you up, sometimes it's this emotional release, but whatever it is, it's perfect. I don't think there's another animated series I can think of that does that.
No, definitely not one that we've talked about. I'm sure there are others out there, but like and I just want to keep it in mind, keep the musical cues and stuff in mind as we talk about these episodes, because I'm just off the top of my head from watching the 4 that we watched, there are definitely moments where music really comes into play, either if it's atmospheric or if it's like plot elements, like you mentioned. Yeah, go ahead, Sean.
And I think the biggest thing for me is just the consistency. If this was something that you only received this music from the seatbelts to bookend each episode,
Right.
it would still be fantastic. But the fact that there is music that complements everything and all the actions and fight scenes that happen throughout the entire series really just lends to the credibility of Kano and just the seatbelts and just it sort of solidifies that. And I'll be honest, like in preparation, because I was going through my head, racking my brain and trying to think to myself, what other shows have I watched that have had this element in it? What have had that consistency from episode to episode, from theme song until the closing credits song? And the only other show that I've been able to find is Batman the Animated Series.
Okay.
They keep the score from beginning to end consistent in terms of the tone and the music throughout the entire show. And I know we're getting into it next week. It's so hard to compare these two in my brain because I've watched so much of them within the last 2 weeks.
Okay.
That I keep going back and forth on points. I'm like, oh, I like one more because of this, and then I go back and I watch another episode of the other show, and I'm like, oh, I like this one more. They're both so phenomenal.
Look, I'll be honest. The one for Cowboy Bebop, I'd say just now for me, just having watched the episodes, it's not just that the music stays consistent and has a nice tone, and then lifts up the emotional beats and stuff. It's that it's actually sometimes part of the plot, and always,
right.
Not always, but usually part of the titles as well. So like the first episode we're going to talk about is called Asteroid Blues. Another one is called Dog Serenade. A lot of the titles have, there's one like Mushroom Samba. There's one called Sympathy for the Devil, which has this like harmonica playing kid. The music is just like woven into the entire fabric of this show. It's a really complete system and series, and the music of the seatbelt and Yoko Kanno is just like throughout, and it's perfect. It's just absolutely perfect.
Yeah,
Right.
mentioning the harmonica though, that is something that's unusual that they employ. I feel like in a lot of episodes, they give it kind of that folksy sort of Western.
Oh, definitely.
Feel,
With the cowboy kind of
exactly,
aesthetic.
yeah.
Because it's basically a space western. Like if you guys haven't somehow watched this show or at least heard of it, I'd almost compare it to Firefly. It's like an animated Firefly, in a sense.
Okay, I could see some of
If that helps, if that helps somebody out there that's never seen this get like a grip on like just a start of what this is kind of like, it's kind of like an animated Firefly.
Yeah.
If you just finished Firefly
You're
and you're like, I want to dip my toe into some anime that's going to be a little bit related. A, what's been taking you so long? Seriously.
Yeah. Wow.
B, immediately jump into this one.
Could be a kid, but honestly, like this series has been called a gateway series for anime, and honestly, the very first episode, which we're now going to talk about, is a perfect entryway to get into the rest of this series. I know for Allison, it wasn't like the first anime you ever watched, but knowing that you'd have to get through this first episode to decide if you wanted to watch any more, was probably at least a consideration in the back of your mind. So
yeah, I think that it didn't really hook me until the very end, because I spent the whole episode just expecting the trope to be that this woman and this outlaw are a major part of the series, right? Like a first episode usually sets up the major characters, and like there was some humor, with Jet and Spike, but then you meet this other duo, and then at the end of the episode, they die. And
spoiler alert.
That's when I was like, wow, this show is something completely different. I don't know what to expect from it moving forward.
And we've talked sort of about the tone, and I want to say this. It feels like there's always been a very noir tone that is consistent throughout this entire episode, because you're introduced to some of these characters, and Allison, like you said, at the end, you're surprised because you have this investment. You think, oh, they might come back in the next episode, and then they're dead. And it's
like in one of the most dramatic ways possible.
Very dramatic, yeah.
But we should mention that it's episode 1 is called Asteroid Blues, and this is actually Melanie Harker's suggestion for the show. She couldn't be with us tonight, unfortunately, but we decided that we wanted to keep this episode discussion in here, not just because it's a great one from Mel, but because it's a great entryway for the rest of the series. And it really does set up things. It sets up not just expectations, but the expectation that you will be surprised by things that happen in future episodes. So like Allison mentioned, the story kind of tracks our bounty hunters that we meet first off, which is Jet and Spike. It's just these two guys right now. and they're going after a bounty of basically a drug dealer and this his like girlfriend slash wife woman that he's with.
Right.
And that's just the basic setup, and it really does not end the way you expect for a number of reasons.
But what's so brilliant is like watching it in the context of having seen the full series now, because this is the first time I've gone back through it, is the unity of the vision that they had for the whole show.
Right.
So it's like there are so many episodes that go in so many different directions and have their own like sort of almost spin-off feel, you know, and they kind of go off and do their own adventures. But when you watch that episode, knowing what is to come, and that the relationship between Jet and Spike essentially never changes from that episode onward, it's just kind of brilliant.
Yeah, do you guys want to talk about that relationship? Because it's not exactly the first thing that we see. The very first thing that we see is sort of an out of time, you don't know where you are or what's happening montage, like old timey, very noir montage of Spike, who you haven't even met yet, and a lot of weird.
Well, it's really a hint of things to come.
Yeah, things that have happened, things that will happen, and things that have yet to happen. Yeah. Yes,
and I think Allison, to your point, just about the vision of this, you watch this, and it's very brief, it's very fleeting. And I can't remember if they give you more tastes of this throughout the course of the series. But if they don't, this is an amazing callback for the final 2 episodes to kind of reintroduce you to that setting and that tone, and just to kind of recap on the journey of Spike.
Yeah, and they do throughout the series. It's like every 5 or 6 episodes. So you get you get about 4 different chunks of this major arc that he has gone through and continues to go through and will ultimately end up in. It's pretty much like every 6 episodes. I think he even gets like a mini movie. There's a couple 2-parters in here because it ends with the Real Folk Blues part 1 and 2, but then there's like Jupiter Jazz 1 and 2, which is kind of about him and his nemesis named Vicious, who we won't really get to talk about tonight, unfortunately. Maybe we'll slot that for a future time because it's one of my all-time favorite hero and villain pairings in all of anime.
What a great rivalry.
It's amazing. But yeah, unfortunately, we don't touch on that one in this one tonight, except for that very brief intro, which I love that they have that intro. It's got like that kind of classical piano, very, very melancholy kind of playing. And then stuff happens. You're like, I don't know what this is. And then bam, it just hits you with that theme song. You're like, what?
Like you get church bells and then it jumps into the theme song.
Right,
and you're like,
theme song. Okay, so let's look at the episode itself. You mentioned the relationship between Jet and Spike. We can kind of talk about that a little bit because, as we mentioned in our synopsis, Spike was basically a former hitman assassin for a criminal syndicate, and Jet was a former police officer, basically, who was supposed to bring these guys down. So you would think these 2 guys are like the the oddest couple you would ever find. But they've actually, because Jet has come away from he's like retired himself from the police force for reasons we find out later, and Spike has also gotten away from more or less the life of crime, sort of, at least violent crime, sort of. Yeah. They both kind of like found themselves meeting in the middle of this gray area where they're neither cop nor criminal. There's something in between.
Right.
I mean, did you have any just...
Boy, howdy, they're bounty hunters.
Yeah,
but they're not really friends, but they rely on each other.
Yeah, and there's this like rough, this friction between them at all times, whether it's over food or whether it's over space or whether it's over their behavior, but it's also a very like caring relationship. Mm-hmm. Jet definitely looks out for Spike and knows when he's about to do something stupid. He knows that he can't stop him from doing it, but he knows that he should probably be there to pick up the pieces when he's done, which is exactly what happens in this episode.
Yeah, they're like a really old married couple a lot of times. And some of the sweetest moments are when they're eating together.
Yeah.
And there's a moment, not to jump ahead, but in the end of Hard Luck Woman, when they're just like downing those hard-boiled eggs in silence. Just both just like... eggs. It was kind of a beautiful thing. Like, I think that sort of, sums up their relationship, is that they would never admit how much they care about one another, but their actions clearly show it throughout the series. And also, the fact that Spike's story does bookend the whole show, but also Jet is the first other character we meet, and I believe the last of the core group that we end up seeing.
Yeah, I
can't remember exactly, but I'm pretty sure.
I think that's right.
So that again just kind of shows his importance.
It's those uncomfortable, comfortable silences that they share with one another, where you can see that they agree upon so much, and they're just happy being in each other's presence. they might not agree on every single issue, but they don't have to. That's the dynamic of this relationship that they have, is that there is that friction, but at the end of the day, like we've said, they rely on one another and they care for each other. Whether or not they say that,
right?
Never. It's just some of those things that are just never actually spoken.
Right. I want to jump into just a couple things to kind of just give you a sense of this world that we're in. So for this particular bounty, the guys are sent to Tijuana. And when you think Tijuana, you think, the current location here in North America on the planet Earth. However, this Tijuana, if I watched the episode correctly, is actually like a artificial space station, or part of an artificial space station that's actually like a Dyson ring, or like a ring that is spinning so that it generates its own gravity. Because every time you look at the sky or you look at the distant landscape behind you, the Earth is sloping upwards. And it's just like that visual cue is such a weird thing to see in any series. Yeah.
It's touted as a asteroid colony. The Tijuana asteroid colony is what they call it.
And they're just like, oh, down in TJ, they got them good carnitas. You're just like, oh, they're going to Tijuana. And it's set up like, it looks like an old kind of Mexican village, but that's been kind of modernized because there's different languages for the signage everywhere. And, there's just like people in sombreros and ponchos, or just drinking tequila in the middle of the day and just like hanging out at bars.
But then three guys that are at the bars,
I love those
that
three
just
guys,
continue
the three amigos,
to complain about each other.
And they're like running gags throughout the entire series too. Like these guys, these old guys keep showing up. So it's like they're setting the stage for all these different things that are going to show up in the rest of the series. But they're also introducing you to a world where this drug dealer isn't just a run-of-the-mill drug dealer. He deals in something called bloody eye. And bloody eye is basically like this crazy stimulant chemical that it like mists into your eye. Your eyes go like crazy bloodshot, but you become like a superhero for a limited amount of time. You basically turn into like Jason Bourne, or somebody that you could, like, time slows down for you and you can just watch everybody move in slow motion as you like run around them, punch them in the face, knock them out a window, shoot them up, whatever. It's a great drug for a criminal or
kids. It's a great drug.
Kids, we've talked about cartoon drugs on this show many times. Bloody Eye is one of my favorites.
Look, if you want to relive Max Payne bullet time in real life, this is what this is.
You want bloody eye, but you can get addicted and then just like eventually go crazy. And then your girlfriend, who's not really pregnant, will kill you in space.
Right. So we have this drug dealer named Asimov.
Yeah.
We have this drug dealer named Asimov and his female companion named Katerina.
I believe so, yeah.
And it's sort of their goal to sell these. And as we've mentioned, there is this heavy bounty hunter aspect of the show. And so there is a bounty that is put out on Asimov's head. And so this is what leads Spike and Jet to come to TJ to try to recover that money, because, as we've mentioned, these cooking scenes that are between them, they are shown to be very, very poor in terms of the food that they actually have to cook.
Yeah, it's basically
or
just
lack thereof.
Yeah, it's just filler. It's just a lot of like peppers and cabbage. They never, and that's a running thing throughout this, they like never have enough money for food.
For me, the thing that is so great about Asteroid Blues, that Allison had already previously mentioned, is that it does a great job of surprising the viewer in terms of what's going to happen. And just coupled with the music, this is just, we've talked about many times how a show should have a good pilot and a good introduction. And this hits all of the beats of expanding the world, showing you something very unique, and opening up the potential and possibilities that they have through sort of these weird cartels and some of this bizarre drug use, but also the fact that we have this odd couple that's in space as bounty hunters who care about each other but just don't want to communicate very well.
Because they're dudes.
Yeah, they're dudes.
They're just hard living bounty hunting dudes. You know how it is. Yeah.
Dudes.
It's like if me and Sean decide to be like Dog the Bounty Hunter, just like, care about each other. I'm not going to tell him that. I'm not going to tell him that on like a live internationally broadcast podcast or anything.
I feel like that show would just be you tasing me every once in a while when I do
make sure
something
it still works.
that's out of line. Yeah, just got to check the batteries on this one.
I mean, you don't want to go out there with a busted taser. That's the lesson of Asteroid Blues.
Right.
Allison, anything else from this episode?
I think Sean really nailed it, that as far as a first episode goes, it shows how confident the show is in its storytelling. Yes. And that it gives you enough of a tease to pull you in, but it doesn't reveal too much. It's not just exposition that then they conveniently forget about in episode 2, which
Exactly.
so many series do. So yeah, I think it's an excellent opening
Yeah,
for a great show.
I'd echo both your statements. This is a world where you can watch the first episode if you love the world that's being set up and the character dynamics that are on display, and you love it and you want to see more, then guess what? That's exactly what you're going to get through the rest of the series.
It's consistent.
It's consistent. It's a great introduction. Mel made a great suggestion for this episode. But now we're going to jump ahead quite a bit, more than halfway through the show.
Yeah.
And we're going to jump to Sean's suggestion. We're actually just going to go in episode order here too. So Sean's suggestion comes at episode 16. What do you got for us, buddy?
So I was really into Black Dog Serenade, and this was an episode that I wanted to recap on, and it sort of explores a little bit more of the past that Jet Black has. And so kind of keeping in mind, as I said, sort of these body enhancements that he has that are never really discussed, this is your opportunity to find out a little bit more about what's actually happened. And so this is great because you get more of Jet's history, his past, and even the series of flashbacks again have like a very like 1940s, 1950s noir feel where he's in like a trench coat with like a fedora hat with like a big.
Still the Wolverine facial hair though.
he's a
Still
little
the
trimmer.
Wolverine facial. Yeah.
But Sean, I love that you picked this one because, like you mentioned at the beginning of the show, Jet is a great character as part of the ensemble, but he doesn't often get a solo episode.
No.
And this
right.
is
And so this
one
this
of the few that he
spotlights.
gets. Yeah.
Right. This spotlights Jet and sort of his process because it's hinted and it's talked about the fact that he is former ISSP.
Right.
But you never really understand where that departure occurs, and so this really delves more into the past that he has and also sort of what his future is going to become. This is one of those moments where you really kind of very clearly see a character have a realization about his past, and that allows him to feel confident in the choices that he's made in the present. And I think that feels sort of rare. And when they wrap this in and when they finally give him the reveal, and I should probably just say the reveal, that his former partner, I believe it's Fad,
Right.
betrayed him and is the one who shot him that led to the injury where he doesn't have an arm anymore. That's a really powerful moment. And when he finds this out, the resolution, again, in this episode, very surprising
Complete
to find out.
surprise.
Completely
moment,
surprising to find out. And it's a fantastic moment.
And before we reveal that moment, you should also mention that it adds kind of like the layer of drama to it that for not his entire life, but his life since the time that he basically lost his arm, Jet has been under the impression that he lost it to a fellow named Uday Taksim, who was just basically like an assassin, a criminal, a really nasty guy who they were tracking down. He thought he fell into a trap. And I thought it was this guy that actually took the shot that, severed the arteries in his arm and just made his arm useless so that he had to get a cybernetic replacement. There's also an interesting layer here where Jet's kind of caught, this arm is kind of caught between two worlds because the technology exists now in 2071 in their time that he could actually just get it like completely remade. It'd be fine. It would look totally normal. But it's kind of like part of his like code of values. It's part of his the old guard that he kind of holds onto this arm, even if it's busted and broken and not working properly. He holds onto it as like a memento of the past. And then to your point, Sean, that past is like, it's like tearing off a bandage. Like everything is a lie. Yeah, it's amazing.
Right. Yeah, it's crazy too because we've talked about sort of the dynamic regarding Jet with the rest of this group, and this episode was great because I related to this a lot because you really see Jet as sort of the father figure on the Bebop. And there's this moment where Faye is attempting to take a shower and the water's not working properly, and Jet's just like, I fixed it, it should work. And she gets in there and
as he's
like
trimming his bonsai plants, he's like, doesn't want to be bothered.
And so I think it shows a lot because it shows a lot of patience on his part, and it shows to me some of his emotional intelligence, and that he's able to just kind of relax, and he does all this crazy stuff, and they go through all these adventures that he has with Spike. But at the end of the day, he's able to just kind of concentrate and meditate in a way that you don't really see any other character. He has these moments where he's able to reflect about what's happening, and about what could potentially happen, because he's leading a very dangerous lifestyle.
Yeah.
And so, these moments where he's cooking or where he's taking care of his bonsai or where he's fixing the bebop are just these wonderful kind of fatherly moments that you don't always see, and you don't really get to experience them from any other character.
And also in those final moments with Fad too, they have this very warm relationship earlier in the episode. You see them kind of joking around and kind of razzing each other, and then he finds out this incredible betrayal, and yet in those final moments, he's almost tender with him. He jokes with him. He gives him a cigarette. He's not just sitting there just like, die, you dog. Like he's just, like you said, very calm and reflective. Like, this was my friend, and maybe this is a lie, but he's still, this relationship was still true to some extent. It's a really complicated emotional moment, and that twist, in a way, is, I think, one of the things that makes the show so unique and so interesting.
Do you want to lead us through what that final reveal is, sort of at the end, Allison, of what happens?
I actually have a question about it,
Yeah,
because
sure.
I'm not completely sure.
Please.
So we see Fad kill Uday.
Mm-hmm.
And then
basically, Uday has the drop on Jet at this point. They've had a fight. Uday has the drop on him. And Uday, basically at gunpoint, is now doing like this villainous monologue. But instead of just being like, I've waited this long to kill you, he's like, by the way, you should know, I never had a problem with you. It was your partner that set you up and took your arm. But then, as you were saying.
So then, so Fad takes him out, and then Jet's like, oh, you're actually coming to silence him for good and all of this. And anyway, so now Fad has the drop on Jet, and you hear the gunshot, and it very easily, and the thing about this show is that very easily Jet could have died in that moment.
Yeah.
Like, I completely believed he could be dead. The way he's sort of laying on the floor, you think he's dead. But then you realize that it's Fad who's been shot.
Yeah.
And
Jet like dove for a gun. I think it was probably Uday's gun.
It was Uday's gun. Yeah, they kind of just show it in this really quick kind of cut.
Full of blood. Yeah.
And then he sort of, then as Fad sort of falls, he's like, his gun falls and opens up, and he sees there's one bullet in the chamber. And he said, he's like, just like, you bastard, you knew that I would kill you with your own gun or whatever. But I was curious, like, so was Fad basically like, there is one bullet in there. Did he know that wasn't going to kill Jet, or was it sort of a Russian roulette moment?
I think it was a Russian roulette moment.
That's
what he was leaving it up to luck.
Because this actual final moment, this final kind of like, it was set up earlier in the series, earlier in the episode. Because when Fad actually calls Jet and he's like, hey partner, I got one last, let's team up again, do one last thing. They have this moment where Jet shows up, Fad pulls out this like old like 6-shooter wheel gun revolver, which in 2071 is like a weird thing for somebody to have. And he does this kind of like quick fancy move where he spins it around in his hand and he drops it back in his holster. Meanwhile, Jet's pulling out a cigarette and he's like, oh, you still think you're a real gunslinger with all those fancy moves, huh? It's like, and then he says something like you cost the department too much. And he's like, why? Because of my gun? He's like, no, they keep paying your salary.
Yeah.
So there's just like this cool camaraderie between the two of them, but it focuses on the guy, Fad, who thinks he's very much like a gunslinger, and he might take risks that he doesn't need to, like playing kind of a Russian roulette and using this old wheel gun, and then Jet offering him a cigarette. And they pair it, and they parallel that scene when Jet actually shoots Fad to death, and whether Fad was just tossing that up to luck and just being like, is it going to be me or is it going to be him, or if he did it purposefully where he was like, I don't want to live this lie anymore, and Jet needs to be the one that takes me out, and I want to be done. That's kind of left up for interpretation.
Again, the show is so ambiguous on so many points.
Oh yeah, even right up to the end,
including Edward's sexuality.
Yeah, exactly. Gender, sexuality. Yeah.
Gender, everything.
And
being.
Do you remember Ed's moment of levity in this one? Because it sounds super dark, right? It's noir. There's betrayal. There's assassins. There's Jet losing his arm. There's all this history. But then Ed,
the bonsai with the water.
Yeah, Ed comes in with a great moment of levity.
Well, and that was another moment too, talking about Jet and Spike's relationship, where Jet basically tells Ed like, "Look, I might not come back. Look after my bonsai." And Spike comes in. He's like, "Why would Jet leave?" Because I mean, Ed is just like flooding the whole room with water, and Ian's like running around, and Faye's screaming because she's trying to take a shower. And anyway, so it's
she's still in that yellow bathrobe that she's always in just about every episode, paying fan service.
And and Spike is just like, he's like, why would Jet leave his bonsai to Ed.
Yeah.
And that is like that trigger where he's like, he knows Jet well enough to know that he cares about these little bonsai, that he would not do this unless something was going really wrong. And putting Ed in charge of anything is pretty much stuff going really wrong.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
So yeah, it was, and then Ed just like bounces away, like, of course I just flooded all this, and Spike's like, just get him up. He's like, okay, and it just like takes off, you know. So
it's a great moment of levity there. But yeah, Sean, I want you to get last word on this one because it was your pick.
No, just to the only final thought that I have is that the moment where he hands everything over to Ed and he's doing these cartwheels around the room, in the Japanese language version, he's singing some song about pot pie.
Yeah.
Like,
we had our
randomly,
captions
like,
on. Yeah.
Oh my god.
She's just singing, or he or she is just like something like bok choy, pot pie, just like singing crazy songs, cartwheeling out of the room.
Chicken noodle.
You can't. I mean,
but
if
again,
you love that
it's
character,
such
it's very funny. Yeah.
Right. But it again, it's that little moment of levity in such a serious scene where it's like, I might not come back. Take care of my bonsai.
And Ed's like, okay.
And she's like, bye-bye. Just like an Elmo in the background, just like jumping and screaming over
She's like Buddy the Elf. Like, she doesn't take anything too seriously. She's always very fun and uplifting.
Yeah.
Which is why I don't think she really shows up. She does show up in this next episode. But even Ed's appearance in this next episode cannot lift. I apologize. This is probably the darkest and most twisted episode of the entire series. So
this is Dave's pick.
Of course, it's the one that I picked.
Of course it is. This is episode 20.
Yeah, Pierrot le Fou. And I know that this is a fan favorite out there. And I picked this for a number of reasons. One, because it is dark and twisted. Two, it scares Allison out of the room, which I think is hilarious.
I literally left the room.
She
for
left,
half the episode, but I left in the wrong half.
She didn't stay gone long enough.
I left at the first half, which is not that scary,
Not
and
scary.
returned for the horror show that is the second half of the episode.
Yeah, the most like nightmare-inducing twisted portion of this whole thing.
That was unfortunate.
Sorry. But I also picked it because I think it's one of the more like the standout episode as far as a departure from theme, a departure from what we've seen so far and what we will see in the rest of the series. It's just so much different for this one that to me it's definitely a standout. It's almost like you watched a little horror movie, a slasher film almost, within this series. Now, they do have another one that I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but it's where they have like this mysterious entity in the Bebop that's making everybody sick and like biting them.
Oh, yeah.
That actually turns out to be pretty funny because it's like an old lunch like sandwich or something that like Spike left in a refrigerator that had gone rancid. It's become sentient and started attacking everybody. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
This Pierrot le Fou is not hilarious in any sense. Even the ending is very just discordant and sad and bittersweet and disturbing. So essentially what happens is Spike is just off on his own, just playing pool, hustling people at pool, just making that money, making them woolongs. And he's not out on a bounty hunter run at all. He's not looking for everybody. Jet's back up on the ship, everybody's on the ship, everything's going fine. It looks like just this weird little like vignette slice of their life that they happen to have on the Bebop. And then you see, I don't know how to describe this guy in a way that makes sense that's not comical, but it's just like a very fat guy with a frilly kind of collar in like a big operatic suit with a cane and a top hat. And it sounds hilarious.
He's like the penguin if he was a balloon that you blew up.
Yes, like an inflatable penguin from Batman, basically.
Or sort of like a big top ringleader crossed with
like a circus
balloon.
barker.
Crossed with a balloon.
Crossed with a balloon. Because
a murderous balloon.
A murderous gun-turning balloon.
Yeah.
And this guy, as you peel layers back on him, like so as to just to describe that, it's probably like, oh, that doesn't sound scary at all. When this guy shows up, the very first thing you see in this episode is just kind of like his silhouette. You see him looking at a building, and then all of a sudden the camera just like tilts up, shoots up the side of the building, flies over it, and then you're looking down at like a cityscape, and you're like, all right, I'm this guy, but I'm just like flying for some reason. I don't really know what's happening. What that eventually...
Your nightmare has begun.
Yeah, your nightmare just started. Because what will eventually happen is he shows up to what you find out is a director of the ISSP and all of his bodyguards. So you're talking like the biggest... below military, but the biggest police organization with the best weapons and guards people that they have guarding their new director. And this guy has basically gone through the cities just assassinating them left and right. And you don't know why until episode's end. You don't really figure out why. But he does it in
what is the line that he uses?
Hello, gentlemen. I have journeyed here to kill you all. And then he just unloads on these guys. And he shoots from his cane. So he just starts shooting from his cane.
As he's like toppling around.
Yeah, this guy moves like he's just full of helium. Like he just kind of dances around.
Like he's Grover Cleveland after a bender.
It's a perfect way to describe him. Grover Cleveland after a bender on a murder spree. And it's just the way he moves, the way he grits his teeth, the way he stares like dead-eyed, unblinking at people.
Just like Grover Cleveland.
Just like Grover Cleveland.
Grover Cleveland.
He's unstoppable. He's got these like powers where if you shoot at him, he's got a shield. He can just like fly and levitate and move at like just inhuman speeds and motions. And it's just on display throughout the rest of this episode. And I've already spent 5 minutes talking about how crazy this guy is without talking about any plot. But eventually, it comes to a showdown between this guy, Grover Cleveland, and Spike. And Spike literally just got caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. Like he just walks out of an alley. He sees this assassination take place. Pierrot le Fou just turns around to him and he's like, "Hello, boy." And then he just marks him for death, basically. So the rest of the episode is Spike trying not to get killed.
But the more horrifying twist is the one that comes near the end of the episode when you realize that Pierrot has actually been the victim of some really terrible experimentation to try to create a perfect assassin.
By the ISSP.
Right, which has caused his mind to regress to essentially that of a murderous child.
Yeah.
And he, like, that all plays into, like, you see the flashbacks, you see all the, like, the horror that he went through, which is its own disturbing.
And that's where Ed comes in. Like, her really only scene in this one is Jet asks her to hack into the ISSP, look for Sector 13, and she hacks in and, like, finds all this video. Yeah, just flails on the computer. And she finds all this video footage and archival footage of this guy named Tong Pu, who became this crazy assassin. And then it's got like Akira level like experimentation, and it's just so disturbing.
It's messed up. And then what makes it, to me, the very worst part of, like, I could maybe get through all of that.
Yeah.
And have done, sadly, twice, which I didn't intend to do, is at the end when, you know, he's basically throwing Spike around and
yeah. So real quick, so Tong Pu basically invites Spike out. He's like, "Hello, boy, I want to throw you a fun party," and he invites him to this like Disney World-esque theme park at night, which is like abandoned.
Yeah, horrifying,
so creepy.
A horrifying carnival of nightmares, which plays discordant music
The whole time, which is amazing. It just sets the scene so well.
And he and Spike, you know, have this fight or whatever, and Hero is clearly winning, and then Spike just like sort of stabs him, not even that terribly, in like the leg. You know?
So what happens just briefly before that is when we see in these flashbacks, we see that Tong Pu has seen this cat that's like sitting on the shelf literally watching everything that's happening to him. So all these terrible experiments that are happening to him. The only thing he really sees is these doctors in masks, so he can't really see their face. And then this cat with 2 differently colored eyes. And then a side note, this is actually a data cat, which is just kind of like Ein, who's a data dog. So this cat is basically computerized. It's like keeping track of all this information. But Tong Pu only sees it as a reminder that like anytime he sees a cat, he freaks out. He shoots a toy cat. He shoots at a real cat that was in the alley. And then when he sees Spike has 2 differently colored eyes for a reason that's told within the series. And that causes him a moment of hesitation, which is when Spike nails him with the knife.
Spike wounds him in his leg, his just giant leg. Like, and it's the sort of thing that, like, if this was a normal fight, that would not be, you know, you'd pull it out and you'd keep fighting.
Yeah.
In fact, I think that's what Jet does in Dog Serenade.
Exactly.
But anyway, but because Hero has this like child's mind, he's then like rolling on the ground, crying out, "Mommy, mommy," and like crying. And
while this parade of like puppets and mascots and like the light parade for Disney is just like playing behind to like this discordant music.
Horrifying.
Yeah, that's not even the worst part.
Like, even though you know he's this chaotic, crazy murderer, just to hear anyone like crying and calling out "mommy" is just like soul crushingly dark and disturbing.
But at least he's put out of his misery in the worst way possible. Sean, do you remember how he ends up meeting his maker?
Yeah, as he's withering on the floor crying for his mother, one of the like animatronic robots that's in this parade steps on him, and you have this moment where you kind of like see just the foot come down, And then when it comes back up, there's no crying for anybody's parents. Then at that point, it's all done.
And like at this point, Jet contacts Spike and he's like, Spike, we got intel on him. And Spike's just like, I don't need to hear it. I'm done.
I'm all done.
We're all done.
The thing that, Allison, I know that's what creeped you out the most, but they continued to do these tight close-up shots of his mouth, of his mouth, and he just has he had very pointy incisors, and there was like this like grinding of the teeth that he continued to do as he was smiling.
Yeah, creepy smile.
Like just like turned up Joker-esque smile as he's shooting people and enjoying and loving every moment of it. But then he's grinding his teeth, and I don't know what it is, but that teeth grind that made me cringe. That was nails on a chalkboard for me.
That, the unblinking giant red eyes, the super like hyper realistic close-ups on his face. I understand why everybody's a little like squirmy after this episode, and then the final moments are just like the most heartbreaking because it's that discordant kind of like the parade is coming to an end, the screen kind of irises out, and it ends on like a discordant note that never resolves either into a harmony or into anything. It just like leaves that note hanging, and it's just like right in your spine. And this is when I'm so glad, Sean, that like you mentioned the outro music is there to like bring me home and make me feel better again.
Ooh.
It's a nice
just take a deep breath and just release.
Yeah. So I guess that's not your favorites, guys. It's weird how that.
I really enjoyed the episode. Okay. I made the mistake though of watching it right before I went to bed one night.
And Sean has not slept since.
No.
I watched that
been
Monday
wide awake,
night.
grinning, grinding his teeth
for
the last 48 hours.
It's now a Wednesday, and that was 4 weeks ago. So I'm doing real well right now, guys.
We're taking Sean over to a health center after this.
Please help me.
So after I brought the entire show down, Allison, would you like to introduce us to your episode tonight?
Yeah, so I find it interesting that I guess you could even say 3 of the 4 that we chose talk about the backstories of the characters.
Yeah.
And for me, in Hard Luck Woman, which is the 24th episode and the last episode before the 2-part finale, we finally get a lot more information about Faye. We got some of her backstory in My Funny Valentine, which I think happens right before Black Dog Serenade, as far as finally figuring out her origins, which she had been searching for, that she has been cryogenically frozen for 54 years, so she's still 20 years old, but all of her friends, people that she knew, her memory is essentially erased, and she has these flashes, but all the people that she knew are either dead or very, very old at this point. And she's not exactly sure still where she comes from. So Hard Luck Woman reunites Faye with the literal places that she's sort of been dreaming of and having these snippets about. But it also is a story about Ed finding her father, which I love when Spike's like, you have a father?
Yeah, because they like look at Ed as like this weird like alien creature.
Yeah, like she just sprung fully formed from the ground.
Grew somewhere.
Yeah. And so, when Faye is trying to figure out where it is that she came from, Edward comes in and is like, Edward knows, and follow me. So they go and find it. And,
yeah, because they head back to Earth, basically.
Right.
Which is, at this point, 2071 is like a complete disaster area. There's still some people there, but it's a complete disaster.
It's basically like WALL-E.
Yeah.
At that point.
Yeah.
It's just like this garbage pile of like charred ruins. And so Ed goes back and turns out...
an orphanage.
One orphanage, yeah.
So Ed goes back with Faye and they meet all these creepy little kids and this nun who's like, Edward? And it's like, oh, Edward was like a stray cat that just wandered in here a couple years ago and then left and, hoped she was okay. And here she is. And anyway, so the nun gives Edward this little picture of her father and is like, he came looking for you. And we also get glimpses of the father. He's sort of this kook this huge, really massive guy that follows meteors crashing to Earth so that he can map the Earth. And his way of explaining this is that he's creating order out of the chaos after the destruction, basically, of the planet.
It's like him and his assistant are just racing around this like Range Rover kind of like tank thing. Just every time a meteor falls and impacts a new crater, they put this machine in the ground. It maps the new area, so it just shows a larger crater or a crater where there was none before. And they kind of look at him like, you guys are insane. Like, these things fall like every 2 days. There's no way you can keep up with it. And it's just like this weird side story. But
yeah, and it also shows sort of his chaotic life and how Edward sort of got lost and all of that. But anyway, so it's this really emotional journey for Faye, who, you know, is finding all of these places that she used to know, these people she used to know. And first we get a resolution for Edward where she decides that she wants to, her father basically invites her to go with him. And then suddenly a meteor drops and he's just like gone. And she's like, other person is gone.
Yeah.
And it's a little sad, but then she sort of decides, like, you know what, I'm going to go find him anyway. So she takes off. Ein follows in this beautiful moment where Ein, you know, she tells him, she's like, I'm going to be gone. You need to go back to the ship.
All framed in silhouette. So there's like a beautiful like sunset behind them. It's just a silhouette and the silhouette of the rocks that are next to them.
Yeah. And so it's like, it's visually the closing of their chapter. Because this is the last time that we see them in the story.
Right.
And Ein decides to go with Edward. They leave. Later, Spike and Jet, after they've been consuming their eggs that Edward's dad, loves eggs. They
provide
see,
power. Yeah.
They see Edward go, and they see, or actually they don't see her go, but they see the sign that she left. It's like, bye-bye, and has a giant crazy smile.
On their like launch pad of the Bebop ship. But
as sweet as that is, then we also see Faye taking off again and finding her old home. She remembers where it is. She's running up to the steps just like she's a little girl again. And when she reaches it, she looks out and it's just a wasteland. And it's just devastating.
You can see like the tracing of the foundation of her family home. It's completely gone. She at one point meets a friend that she actually had when she was in high school, who's now like this 90-year-old woman in a wheelchair with a granddaughter.
Who thinks Faye is a ghost.
She thinks Faye is a ghost. Faye actually tells the granddaughter that she is a ghost and then just runs away because she doesn't...
She essentially is.
She basically is.
At that point in time.
She hasn't changed since this accident. And we do get to see the accident. I guess they're on like a space shuttle. And I guess they're leaving the Earth for either a gate to take them to another planet or to go to a different colony. I don't know if that's ever really explained. But basically there's an accident. The shuttle has an explosion. The glass kind of cracks. I guess everybody on board the shuttle dies except for Faye, and she's put into cryogenic preservation. And then you learn over the course of the series that the reason she has like this multi-trillion-dollar debt is because they had never paid for her to go into cryopres. They were just like, well, when we wake you up, when we can cure you and bring you back to life, then you can pay us. It just happened to like accrue a ton of money.
Which is why she becomes bounty hunter and
gambler and thief.
Right.
But the main thing, like of her leaving that older woman behind, was basically like she came there looking for answers.
Yeah.
She saw a woman that she used to know, but basically had no common interaction with for the last 60 years. So it was like, well, what am I looking for?
And that's the reason why I really like the episode is because we get so much backstory for Faye, who I think is a really interesting character, and also for Edward, like unexpected backstory. And then the fact that Edward, who is so kind of silly and chaotic and everything, shares such a sweet moment with Ein, and I just love that pair so much. And they kind of go off and do their own thing. Like, you don't know if she's gonna find her father or not, but she'll be okay. Like, you just know that. And with Faye, like, it's a much darker conclusion because she's just basically laying down in the rubble of her house. And I actually had, for some reason, thought that was the last we saw of her, but Dave said that she does appear again in the Real Folk Blues. So yeah, Sean.
I think I know that you said that Faye has like a very kind of climax to her story to understanding, you know, where she's from. And I'm actually going to say that it was devastating for me to watch Ed.
Oh, really?
And see what happened to Ed, because, you know, you have this moment where you realize all of these events that have led Ed to the point where he or she is right now and is finally reunited with her blood, like with her father. And in that moment, you realize that she is not a priority to her father in any way, shape, or form. And by virtue of the fact that a meteorite lands a couple hundred feet from where they are, and they immediately rush, and the father just leaves her.
Well, and even the fact that Ed originally was at the orphanage has come and gone over the years, but basically they say that, like, her dad says, oh, I forgot that I dropped you off at a daycare 7 years ago and just kind of slipped my mind. It's like, this guy's
and also he's like, what does he call her?
Francois.
He's like, Francois. And then later he's like, oh, I'm so happy to be reunited with my son or daughter. Cuddle beside. And it's like, I could completely understand that he would like name his daughter Edward thinking it was a boy and just like not caring enough
I
to
think
like.
Right.
Ed gave her himself that name
This-
though, at some point.
Oh, maybe.
Yeah.
I loved recapping on this episode, and I think that this was such a great suggestion, Allison, because of a couple things. This episode really hit for me out of the ones that we watched at the sense of longing that these characters have,
Yeah.
the sense of a better life, and ultimately sort of finding where your place is and where you belong. And it just so happens that, again, in this very noir style that we've talked about, in these very surprising moments where you want something good to happen to somebody. You just want one good thing to happen to one person in this show. Faye is back in a location where it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And Ed is at a point where he realizes that he or she's not a priority, and they're still moving forward. And I think that sort of shows the strength of maybe how they portray the human condition, that like there are things that are going to be really terrible and things that are going to be really tragic, but picking yourself up and moving on and carrying on with what you want or what you find to be important is how people live their lives. And they never let go of that in this show. And I think that that's what makes this episode so particularly beautiful.
And it's a great example of, I think, how the series is overall as well, because the whole 26 episode, there's laughs, there's loss, there's romantic relationships, there's friendships that grow and disappear. But the whole thing, it doesn't end with just like all four of them riding off into the sunset looking for that big bounty that they can retire on. Like
high-fiving each other.
Yeah.
They're just like, friends for
No.
life.
I mean, I'm kind of glad it doesn't.
But they
man,
take
yes.
from all the relationships what they need. I don't mean that in like a cynical way,
Right.
but the fact that Sean, I would say I do think it's positive that Edward at least has Ein, and like their
Yes.
connection as they leave, to me, makes it a positive note. But and the fact that like Faye realizes, not necessarily in this episode, but moving into, I guess, the next episode, is that life is gone,
Right.
and she needs that motley crew on the Bebop. That's
Right.
that's kind of her home.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that it's really powerful because it's not like, again, they rely on each other, but they wouldn't have necessarily chosen this,
Right.
but it just kind of, is how it is, and they deal with it.
But what's interesting, I think, to me, watching this entire series again, is that that entire group kind of needs each other. So like you were mentioning, Allison, the strengths of some fill in the weaknesses of others, and they all kind of like get along together. But then just as soon as they kind of figure all that out is when it all starts to kind of go apart again. So Ed and Ein go off on their own adventures, maybe to be reunited with them sometime, but probably not anytime soon. Faye kind of wants to do her own thing, which may or may not keep her with the Bebop. Spike definitely has his own ending that you need to watch the final 2 episodes to find out. And then Jet is he's always going to be with the Bebop, but he doesn't know if the Bebop crew is always going to be there with him. So it's an amazing series to watch in totality. I think the few episodes we suggested are great ones to just sit and watch and not have to worry about any like big spoilers or anything. They're just great little vignettes of each of these individual characters, but also give you a great sense of the series overall. So I'm impressed. I think you guys did a great job with these suggestions. I know I did. But yeah, listeners out there, let us know if these are some of your favorites, or if they ring a bell and you want to go back and check them out again. Please let us know in the comments. Anything else from these episodes, guys, or this series that you'd like to say before we wrap it up tonight?
Let's dip into this recommendation, which I'm going to say we're all unanimously going to say don't watch this show.
Yeah, that is a terrible show. We just spent an hour glowing praise about. I'm still smiling about the worst, most twisted, darkest episode ever.
I assume that if you listen to this podcast, then you're probably already a fan of animated series.
Maybe.
I'm not a huge fan
Yeah.
of animated series, and so this was recommended to me, and I watched a few episodes way a long time ago and didn't continue with it. But then when Dave brought it back up and said you need to finish watching, it's really great. I was really happy I did, because it really was a great experience from start to finish. And going back through some of these episodes now and seeing how it connects and how that story unfolds it's a classic.
Yeah,
it's
it really
really
is.
fantastic.
And I'm glad they were only like 26
agree.
episodes and done. And I don't really even consider that movie part of it. It's an okay watch, but yeah.
Yeah,
Besides
I agree. I've watched the movie, but I was like, this is fine. Thank you. I'm going to just keep with the 26 episodes that are here, which are perfect.
Exactly. We'll just keep
Yeah.
with that. So that's going to do it for our episode of Cowboy Bebop. And now's the time where we're going to turn over for our guest to let you know what she has coming up in the next couple of weeks if you can find her out there in the real world. So, Allison, what's going on? Where can the folks find you?
So for my day job, I am the TV editor at collider.com. So you can find me there. We do reviews, recaps, news, lists, features, editorials, everything you could possibly want about TV, movies, and more. You can find me on Twitter at Keene TV. That's Keene TV.
Excellent. Sean, buddy, what do you have going on the next couple of weeks?
Boy, howdy. We have a bunch of shows that are coming up at Washington Improv Theater. I will be performing improv with Nox. That's NOX exclamation point. You can find out all information and more at witdc.org. And as always, I'm on Instagrams and Twitters at Sean Paul Ellis.
Wonderful, buddy.
Dave, what do you got going on, buddy?
Oh, the same old
You
stuff.
got things.
You
You got things.
know. Nah, I'm over at Collider as well. You can check me out over there just doing the normal news, TV stuff, movie stuff, everything that's good. Be recapping Arrow for the next couple of weeks here as they wrap up their very strange 4th season. You can also find me on Nerdist, where I do freelance writing for their science section. And if you're interested in reading some of my short fiction, you can head on over to davetrumbore.com. If you're interested in finding out more about Saturday morning cartoons, you can do so at our website, SaturdayMorningCartoons.com. Remember, that's morning with a U. Also, check out Sean's handiwork on our Tumblr page, SaturdayMorningCartoons.tumblr.com. You guys have been amazing on our Facebook page, so let's keep that going. I think we're close to like 2,000. We were only at 1,500 a few days ago.
That's awesome.
You guys have gone nuts.
Yeah, you guys are nuts.
You guys are
Loving it.
so crazy.
You guys are so nuts.
Bev, big head in the house.
Oh, hello, David.
There
How
she
are
is
you
again.
doing?
She keeps popping up.
Ooh.
Can't keep a good frog down, I guess. So yeah, check us out on our Facebook page. We've also got our YouTube account. And you can listen to this podcast each and every week through iTunes and Stitcher. If you have any suggestions, want to tell us how right or wrong we were about our Cowboy Bebop selections, send us an email, SaturdayMorningCartoons@gmail.com. Guess what, guys? That was episode 98. You know what's after 98?
We're done with the podcast, right?
Yeah, that's right. We're retiring.
So we're
done.
going to
This
jump
is
to
it.
98.
We're going to retire on our podcast money and live on a giant gold mountain.
Close this out.
It's going to be amazing.
Retire down to Podcast Island.
Yeah.
be done with
with everybody else. All the former podcasters of yesteryear. Grover Cleveland's there. It's going to be a good time. Now we've got a 2-part episode for episodes 99 and 100 coming up, which is crazy to me. And we're talking about arguably the best animated series of all time. Now, I know that's strong words coming after what we just had for Cowboy Bebop, but what do you think, bud?
Guys, no, I mean, this, and I mentioned this earlier, I've watched a lot of Batman, the animated series, and I've watched a lot of Cowboy Bebop in the last couple days. And so this show, it hits this nostalgic chord with me that it just is fantastic. And from start to finish, there are just some interesting moments that as you're watching this, I love it. So I've been so happy to get back into this show and go through this, and just the theme song and everything is fantastic. This is going to be for anybody who's just starting to listen to this show. If you're beginning with Cowboy Bebop and you're doing Batman the Animated Series Part 1 and 2, these are just going to be glowing reviews. This is just going to be me and Dave gushing for the next 3 weeks.
Yeah, we do also watch terrible cartoons here, by the way. We actually started watching
we'll get
terrible
back.
cartoons.
Don't worry, we'll get back into them starting like episode 10.
Guys, we've earned this. We've earned the right to actually enjoy what we watch for a week.
Right.
And this one actually is great because we folded in a bunch of previous listeners who have come in, and they've also just given us their kind of like suggestions. We've got clips from these guys. They're enthusiastic. They're going to give you kind of a different set of opinions from just Sean and myself. We just physically couldn't get everybody in our studio to record at the same time. So we just kind of we have a bunch of guests from previous shows on. So it'll be cool. We'll hear a lot of different voices. And hopefully you can just join us in the enthusiasm. Because it's Batman the Animated Series. I mean, how great is that? And soon, coming out will be The Killing Joke, which is going to reunite Mark Hamill as the Joker, Kevin Conroy as Batman. It's going to be like an R-rated movie version of this same series again, just from one of the best stories to ever come out of the comic. So I'm super excited for all things Batman animated. Check out Saturday Morning Cartoons next week when we start our 2-part Batman the Animated Series episode. Until then, thank you guys for listening. We will see you next time.